All right, so Next.js, stepping into the future of UI development. Um, so what exactly is Next.js? Do a quick intro, and then we're going to kind of jump into the meat. Um, so quick intro on Next.js, started in 2016 by a company called Versal. Versal's backed by, again, some of the biggest names in the industry, and you can see here Jordan Walk, the guy who created React, and Nate Friedman, CEO of GitHub, CEO of Squarespace, Anthony Casalena. All names that I'm sure some, if not, I'm sure you've heard of some, if not all of these names. So Next.js is, a premier framework. It's got backing of some of the biggest names. It's not just, your small kind of startup. It's been around for a while. 1,500 plus contributors on GitHub, over 64,000 stars. Very, very, very active community. Um, they are officially at version 10 right now. So again, been around for a while. Version 10 came out a few months back. I want to say August of last year, off the top of my head. So again, very, very active community. They're constantly updating, constantly improving. So there is, there's a standard, there's a community here to back this up. So it's not just a startup project. Again, if you're going to use it, there's plenty of help out there in the community for Next.js. So what exactly is Next.js? So put simply, Next.js is basically a React-based framework that allows you to easily create these hybrid React apps with little to no configuration. This can be done in any of the following ways, and we're going to step into these individually as we go. One is by server-side rendering, something called static site generation. Again, your traditional single-page application, or you can mix and match any of these three. Which is really, really nice. And all of this stuff comes out of the box. And again, we're going to step into each one a bit. So just to quickly go over some out of the box features in Next.js. Data fetching, which is again what we just spoke about, which is server-side rendering, static site generation, and your traditional single-page application. Something out of the box, which I really love, is something called what Next.js calls Pages, which is a file-based routing system. So they have routing built in. You don't have to actually configure anything. You don't have to do anything. It just kind of works, as soon as you install. And we're going to dive deep into that as we go. Built-in APIs, which is really, really cool. And that also, again, comes with zero configuration. And we're also going to dive deeper into that as we go along. So some other built-in features, built-in CSS support, SAS support with very, very minimal configuration. Actually, version 10 just came out with image optimization, a really cool image optimization feature that they have out of the box. Your traditional static file serving, all your public folders, you can serve all your assets, your images, and CSS files, or any other static files that you have. Fast refresh, which a lot of you may be familiar with if you've used Create React App. This is fast refresh is officially supported in Next.js. It's actually really, really great. TypeScript, for those of us who love working in TypeScript. Again, very, very minimal configuration to get TypeScript up and running. They do have environment variables right out the box, which is really, really, really nice. And for those of us, which is probably the majority of us here, that have to deal with frameworks and libraries all day and deal with documentation, sometimes it's kind of hit or miss. I can confidently say Next.js's docs are great and very simple to follow, and very very easy to follow along, very minimal. It doesn't get too deep into the weeds. It just gives you a really good solid foundation. And this list is pretty much taken from their documentation. So each bullet point, it goes into depth on their website for each of these bullet points. So what exactly is, and we're going to dive into the data fetching part, the SSR, the SSG, and the SPA, just a little bit. So what exactly is server-side rendering? So server-side rendering is basically React components rendered on the server side at request time, right? And for us old school guys, you can kind of, this is similar to how we used to do things, where you use a request to the website, files are rendered on the server side and served up to the browser at request time. So it'll go off and take that request. If there's any content that's needed, maybe out of a database, let's say, it'll make the request, the calls to that database, grab that information. It'll grab the template. If there's any templates, render the page together and serve up to the front end, to the browser. So static site generation. What exactly is static site generation? So this is React components which are pre-rendered at build time instead of at request time. So think blogs, e-commerce sites, documentation sites. So you have a template, you have contents, again, maybe in a database somewhere. At build time, at compile time, Next.js will go out and make a request to whatever external services you need to make requests to get content. It'll take your templates, it'll combine the two into static files. And then when a user requests the web page, Next.js will simply serve up the static page. It doesn't actually make any of the calls to the database or anything like that at request time. That's already done. It's simply serving the static pages. Again, great for something like blogs or documentation sites. Pages where the information and the content don't change all that often. What is an SPA? Again, the majority of us are probably familiar with it. Single page application, an app that works inside of the browser, doesn't require reloading, downloads all the client code. The client request page from the server. It gets all the HTML, JavaScript, CSS, everything that it needs. And then everything pretty much happens client side on the browser. And if there's any requests that need to be made to the server, it does it via Ajax without any page refresh. Server typically sends back some JSON, and the client-side application updates accordingly. So when you're dealing with applications, really, especially your traditional React SPA applications, the fact that you can pre-render gives you, I think, two major benefits. And I'll step through them, and as we go, we'll kind of start to flesh that out. One benefit, obvious, SEO. SEO crawlers traditionally don't play nice with JavaScript. If you request a page and all you're getting back is a script tag and no actual content, the search engine bots usually don't run script tags, usually don't run JavaScript. So there's no content to actually crawl. So you can be losing out on those SEO advantages. Another advantage is a performance boost. So obviously, if you think in your traditional single page applications, your React applications in specific, your browser has to, again, request all of the files, the HTML, the JavaScript, CSS. It has to load all of that, execute all the JavaScript. When the JavaScript actually takes over, then inside your React application, you can go and make a call to your backend services, get your data. Maybe you show a loading spinner while you're doing that. Go get your content, come back, display your content as needed. But if you're pre-rendering on the server side, when on the initial load, when you make that request, you're getting all of the content. And again, we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit as we go. But you're getting the actual content on initial load. So you don't have to make that, you don't have to, browser doesn't have to download the JavaScript, do all the execution, then make the request. You can just have that initial information there. And then at that point, your SVA can take over and you can become, you can continue your interactivity. Excuse me. So that was a very quick primer on Next.js. I thought what would be cool, instead of kind of going through slides and talking through slides, I thought it might be cool to actually build an application and actually just dive into some code. So we're going to build a very, very simple application, but we're going to do it from the ground up. We're going to install Next.js. We're going to build out step by step, and I'll go along, see how we can easily and quickly build out an application. And there's two main things that I think two main things that I want to point out with this application. That is the file-based routing and the API. In specific, I'm going to use it for mocking some API calls. Really quick, a note on file-based routing. What exactly is file-based routing? So Next.js uses a file-based routing on the concept of what they call pages. Pages are simply React components exported from whether JS, JSX, TS, TSX files in the pages directory. And each page is associated with a route based on the file name. So how does this help? Again, routing is done right out of the box. You don't have to do any kind of configuration. And it makes it a lot easier to understand. And again, when we get into the code, you'll see this. It makes things easier to kind of understand where files live. You know, we've all probably dealt with applications where you have a route, but you may not necessarily know where that, where those files live. It might be a bunch of different files. Where's the main file? Where's the components? You kind of find yourself having to search through a routing file to see what files it's getting loaded, and it becomes, it can be a little much at times. So Next.js takes this approach of file-based routing, which just makes things so much easier. And it's done in a traditional way of, as an example, old school way of doing things. You had your index.html in your root. Next.js has index.js or .jsx, etc. So it just makes things a lot easier. And one quick note on that file-based routing is it has an app.js, again, going to get into it, where you can have an app.js wrapper template. So let's say you have like a header, footer that should obviously go across all pages. That's going to live in your app.js, and then each page is going to be essentially plugged into that template. API routing. So out of the box, inside the pages folder, there's an API folder. This is where all your APIs can live. Everything in that folder is going to be treated as an API endpoint by Next.js. These are, excuse me, 100% production ready. So you can obviously write all your APIs, use them for production, no problem. But a great use case that I found that myself and Brian found on the project we were using this for was using it for mock APIs. We had a .NET backend, and we'll dive a little more into it, but obviously the backend, it was there to create the APIs, but the UI, we found a way that the UI didn't have to, didn't have to directly depend on waiting for the back end to supply those APIs. We were able to use this mock API, this API feature for mocking APIs in Next.js, which allowed us to kind of work more in parallel with the back end, as opposed to having to be blocked in that specific case. And the most important thing here you want to take away is that your JSON between the front end and the back end is the most important thing. That contract is at the end of the day the most important thing that allows you to work in parallel. So all you really have to do is get with the backend guys, get with the APIs guys, decide on, okay, this is what the shape of the data is going to look like. Here's what we're going to send down the pipe. Once you agree on that, using this cool API, this API feature, we can build out on the UI side some mock APIs and seamlessly transition to putting it from the back end when those are ready. So enough slides. Let's get into actually making an application. So I have a really simple, this is actually a completely blank project. And we're going to start by, so if anybody's familiar with Create React App, this is very similar. NPX, Create Next App. I'm going to call this Sean. It's going to install. And once this is going, you're going to see just how quick it is to be up. There we go, to be up and running. And before I show you the page and get it running, let me do just going to install in the background a couple things I need for styling. npm run dev. Oh, gotta actually get into the folder. Dev. I'm telling you, live coding is where it's at, guys. Live coding is always where it's at. I had this going so great in my TechTalk run with Brian, and I knew this was going to happen.
Now, maybe is Yarn start since you are using Yarn?
Yeah, let's try. Oh man, pressure is on. Gonna work. Oh man. Oh, port 3000 is in use. That's why. That's my mistake, guys. I have it running here. My mistake. I was running it again somewhere else. There we go. All right. So just like that, we are up and running. Beautiful. We now have an up and running Next.js application. So just to go into, talk a little bit about that file-based routing. You can see here, pages. Again, think a little bit old school index.html kind of style. Index.js is your opening page. It's just a simple React component. We're just exporting a function called home. Right off the bat, they already supply your CSS file, but there's nothing special here, obviously. It's just again, a React component. React component gets compiled into your index page. So let's add a new page. Let's say we want to show a list of stocks. And I am going to do, I will admit, I am going to do a little bit of copy and pasting because I have this already set up just to kind of move things along. So if we come here to the side and say we want a new directory called, we want our URL to be localhost 3000 / stocks. Create a directory called stocks. Inside, same deal. We're going to say index.js, which is our main file for this page. And then I'm actually going to pull it from here. So what's happening here, and what's happening here is, again, a very simple, I'll comment this out really quick, a very simple React component. We have a function called stocks. It's going to return a wrapper, and I'm using styled components for this. It's going to return a wrapper. All it does is check if the stocks have a length, if I have any stocks. If I do, I'm just printing out a table with the stock symbol and the name. Very simple. If not, I'm printing out a progress bar, stuff we've all seen. And this is actually going to come off of a stock file that I created for now. And this file, all this file is very simple array, JSON array of stocks. Nothing special about it. And just to get style components to work, I do need a bit of configuration. Again, very little configuration. And if we open up the Babel RC, we can see this is just very, very, very simple configuration to allow style components to work in your application. If you don't want to, style components is totally a personal preference. If you just wanted to go the CSS module way, you wouldn't have to bother with this. That would just automatically work right out of the box. So we just have to rerun the server. So it sees that Babel file. Babel file. All right, so again, very, very simple React component that all it does is from Material UI, take a table, takes those stocks, prints out the symbol and the name. And now if we go to stocks, we're going to hit our index page. Oh, Material UI core, sorry. So while that's running, which should be quick, because it didn't install. Again, if you notice stocks, that's your URL based on your file, based on the file's system. This is your URL. We have a stocks folder with an index.js inside of it that automatically is going to translate that into URL, localhost 3000 / stocks. God, I love this stuff. I'm going to try restarting the server. This is part of the fun, though, seeing the code and actually seeing things go wrong and seeing if I can fix them. So again, pages, stocks, index.js. We have everything we need. Hey, again, very simple, up and running. Now we have a page, shows static information from from a very simple stocks file, and want to highlight URL is just /stocks. That's it. Don't have to do any kind of configuration. Didn't have to mess with any kind of routing or anything like that. Out of the box, it just worked. So that's cool for your static pages as this is. Let's say what you want to do is I want to make this symbol clickable. And when I click it, I want to go to a page that gives me more information about the stock that I'm clicking on. And you have your team discussion, you come to the conclusion, you say, okay, the URL structure that we want is we want to keep it /stocks, and I want something like AAPL. I want the actual stock symbol in the URL. So AAPL, MSFT, whatever the case may be. How do you tell Next.js that this is going to be dynamic, and what page should it use in the case that it sees this URL? Right now, we're just going to get obviously an error 404 because we haven't told Next.js what to do. So a very cool and easy way to tell Next.js how to handle this is in the stocks folder, create a new file, and in brackets, we can name the file. And I'll go over why we're naming it this specifically. .js. And then we can put over some code, step through it a bit. All right, just to step through the code really quick. Again, styled components, not doing anything special. It is just a React component in a wrapper. If I have any stocks in the array, show them in a table and show more information about that. Show it in the table here, show the symbol, last sale, net change, all that information, and just export that React component. Now, why are we calling it bracket symbol? A couple of reasons. One, when you put a page in brackets as such here, you're telling Next.js, I don't know what this page name is going to be at build time. I'm only going to know it dynamically at runtime. So if you see a URL that says local, in this case, localhost 3000 /stocks / anything, literally anything, grab this page and do something with it. Or I'm sorry, display this page in that situation. So we're saying, okay, Next.js, anything in brackets, that's what we're going to use dynamic whenever you see a dynamic part of the URL. Cool. Now we need to tell Next.js, when you see AAPL, how do I know what stock that I'm actually going to pull? How do I know what's in my URL, right? As a UI developer, you need to know, okay, this is what's in my URL. This is what's being asked for. I need to know that information in order to display what needs to be displayed. This is where the name comes in. So what we're telling Next.js here is when it's a dynamic page, use this page and take whatever is in the URL, whatever is after stocks / whatever it is, put that into your router, which is the Next.js router, which we can see here. We're doing using the use router hook, which is here on line 4 at the top. We're importing the Next.js router. And we're saying, okay, router, okay, Next.js. In your router, they have, by default, a query parameter. We're saying in that query parameter, put whatever the name of the file is, use that as the variable for whatever comes after the URL here. So we're effectively saying, take AAPL or MSFT or AMZM, whatever it is, put it into your query property, name it symbol. Now we can actually go and use the use router hook, grab that symbol, and filter the stocks accordingly. So if I just update this page, right here, we're taking the stocks. We're just filtering through that list of stocks and looking for the specific symbol that was passed. And, oh, sorry. I go back to that stocks page. I'm gonna comment out stock.symbol. Uncomment this. And you're gonna notice here something. As soon as I save, you're gonna see when I get back to the page, link's already gonna be there. So that's the fast refresh feature that's built, again, officially supported and built into Next.js. So we're on our / stocks page. We're saying, okay, instead of just displaying the symbol, turn it into an actual link. We're saying go to / stocks / stock.symbol. Save and go back. Already a link by the time I got there. Fast refresh working out of the box. We can click on a link, take a look at the URL. It is stocks / AAPL for Apple. We have the information for Apple automatically filtered out. We can go back, say Microsoft, automatically there, and so on and so forth. Again, this is all within, a couple minutes. I've got pages already set up. I have routes already set up. And I've already been able to not only create a static page, but I was also able to create a dynamic page. Out of the gate, I didn't have to think about anything. I didn't have to set up anything. It just worked. And it allows me to think of, to focus more on business logic and the actual application than having to spend, everybody out there has dealt with this at some point. You've got to obviously spend, sometimes it can take a half a day, maybe even more, in setting up the router, setting up different, setting up all the Webpack and all that kind of stuff, just to get something like this up and running. So let's take it a step further. Let's say now we're back on our stocks page. Right now, I have a look up here. We're importing stocks from, again, just a basic stocks file on our local host. So we want to take it a step further, and we want to say, you know what? We want these stocks to come from the actual API. We want to test things out, like, what happens if it takes the stocks long to load? We need to have a loader. What happens if we don't receive any stocks, if it's a blank array, or there's an error from the server for whatever reason. We want to test all these different scenarios, and it would obviously be very hard to do that just off of a stock file, sitting on your machine. And we go and we talk to the backend guys and say, hey, we want to have this endpoint set up to serve up these stocks so we can actually start testing and doing different things with our UI code. UI says, obviously we're incredibly busy. UI has tons of things they're doing. They have their own challenges and their own challenges they need to meet in getting that API. So it's not something that can happen overnight, obviously. So we say, okay, no problem. When it comes to APIs, the backend obviously has tons of challenges that they got to deal with and things that they need to figure out and do to get APIs up and running. One of those challenges can sometimes be the front end UI people saying, hey, we need APIs, we need mock APIs, we need something so we can actually test our code, because just doing it off files, it's not going to work. So I think as a way to kind of relieve the pressure, some of the pressure that's on the back end for APIs, we can create our own, again, mock APIs right out of the box in Next.js. So, as spoken about before, in the pages folder, right out of the box, Next.js says, okay, we're going to give you an API folder. Everything in this API folder, we're considering an API. It's an actual API endpoint. They give you a simple Hello.js example, and And if anybody has ever worked with Express.js, it's extremely similar to your Next.js framework. You have your response request and response objects. You can set your status. You can respond with a .json. And this is up and running right away. So as an example, this hello.js that they give us right out of the box, we can go over to Postman and say p localhost 1000 API hello and get request. And that's it. We're receiving the JSON. So right out of the box, our API server is already up and running. So we say, great, we want to have a mock API of these same stocks here that I have on my file. We want to have a mock API of these same stocks coming from the back from our mock API. Here, I take this stock. Okay, so what did I just do there? Similar to how the file-based routing works, where it's going to take, as an example, stocks, your index.js is going to be similar to your index.html file. That's going to be your root. Whatever you name the file in the API becomes the path for your API. So here I've essentially named a route called API stocks. And what's going to happen when I hit API stocks? Very simply, I'm going to respond with a status of 200, and I'm just serving up those stocks as a JSON to via the API. And for dramatic effect, you can actually put a set timeout on this, give it a 2-second timeout. And again, fast refresh working behind the scenes. I go back to Postman and I say localhost API stocks, 2 seconds. There you go. And that's it. That's your API. And again, whatever contract you have with the backend guys, you can simply sit and say, let's agree on the data, the shape of the data that should be coming down the pipe. And you can also, and even agree, you don't have to agree on URL. URL can be irrelevant. Let's just agree on the shape of the data. You can very quickly have an API up and running. And now we can continue testing our UI application with an actual running API that we can control and we can modify and do whatever we want with, while the backend is on their side meeting their challenges and working on the backend API for us, and we can work in parallel. And I didn't have this set up in this project because I didn't want to get too deep into the weeds, but using another out-of-the-box feature from Next.js, environment variables, we can actually go here. I have it hard-coded as localhost 3000. Using environment variables, we can actually replace this and use the environment variables to, in development, point to our localhost, and then in production, point to whatever whatever the URL ends up being from the backend. So we see API stocks. That's a fully functioning API already up and running within literally seconds, or literally minutes. So let's see it a little bit in action. We're going to switch up our React component a little bit. We're going to comment out, no longer pull in the stocks from our static file on our local machine. We're going to, everybody knows React, very simple. We're not doing anything special or crazy with React. We're simply going to make a call to our backend, our mock backend. We're going to receive that JSON. We're going to set stocks in a state. And then if we have stocks, we'll do the same thing. We'll display it. If we don't, we'll show a circular progress while we're waiting. If we go back, and in this case, we'll actually have to refresh to see it. Wait here 2 seconds. So what happened? I refreshed. I actually, my React component actually went out to my mock API. And we see that here. Actually went out to my mock API, got the data, received it, and displayed it accordingly. And now we're free to do whatever we want, test out our loading spinner, which we saw, test out different scenarios, maybe errors, anything like server errors, anything like that, while the backend is working to get us the actual API endpoints. And we can work this entire way in parallel. And once the backend says, hey, APIs are done, here's the URL, we can just seamlessly transition over to using the backend APIs. And again, if the contract is settled upon and all the data is the same coming through, everything should just seamlessly work. I wanted to touch at this point on a little bit of server-side generation. Server-side rendering. One of the features out of the box with Next.js. So how does that work? Next.js provides this function called get server-side props. And it's an async function that you have to export in the page where you're using it. And inside that, you can do essentially whatever you want, as long as you return an object with props that are going to be passed as props into your React component, right? And once it's passed into your React component, the majority of us, that have worked with React, anybody that's worked with React will know what to do with props once they're in your component. So a couple things. I'm going to comment this out because I want to show the difference as to what's actually happened. So right now, we are fetching from our mock API, waiting for the 2 seconds, and then receiving the data. Elements, and I'm going to attach it so you can see what's going on. Or I'm sorry, not inspect element. I want to view page source. So I want to refresh. How many times have we viewed page source in the past few years doing front end work? So there's something I want to note here, and it's a little, forgive me, it's a little jumbled up, but I want to try to point it out as clearly as I can. This is the page that is being received by the browser. And you can see the body tag here. And you can see a couple of div tags that Next.js uses. But what you don't see, and we can search for it, is table. You don't see table anywhere. But obviously, we have a table. And this is, to nobody's surprise, your traditional single page application working to, in effect, downloading all the code, downloading all the front end code, the JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then going out using the JavaScript to make the request, and then populating the page with the appropriate information. If we go back, let's say we want to comment that out, and we want to generate this page server-side. We want to take advantage of SSR, server-side rendering in Next.js. So again, you have to export this get server-side props async function. Inside of that, we're doing a fetch to, same thing, doing a fetch to our mock API, waiting for those stocks. And we're returning, that function as an object with props property, simple props that we're going to pass to our React component. So here we actually have to add it. Right. Again, simple React component. We all know what to do with props. when they're received. So now, we go back. This fast refresh working a little too fast. Okay, so now if we view page source, you see the table. Information's here, right? And again, sorry that it's a little hard to make out, but if you can see what I'm highlighting, that information was rendered server side. So on the server side, it went out, made the call to the backend API, rendered the page, and served it up right away. So we have the table, we have AAPL, we have Apple Inc., we have all the information here. So that's server-side rendering in effect in Next.js. And what you can see, one big thing, at least for me, to take away from that is how easy that was. I mean, all I did was add a function, took an API call in that function and returned an object and passed it as props into my React component. And that's it. I didn't do anything special. I didn't have to, go into my Webpack file or go to this configuration file or go to that configuration file. I didn't have to do any of that. It just works out of the box, which is awesome. All right, so we're gonna, and this also actually shows how you can kind of mix and match. So as an example, we'll keep it this way. Our stocks page is now a server-side rendered page, right? We're getting that information right away. Our symbol page, we haven't touched. We haven't done anything to. It's still your normal SPA React component. I'm going to update this page though, however, and not pull from the stocks. And what I'm doing here is I'm telling this symbol page, when you receive a request, and it's, again, for example, AAPL, I want you to go out, make a call to our mock API, get the stocks, filter it, right? Again, based on router query dot symbol, which we spoke about before. Nothing special, just use state, set your stock, and render accordingly. Kind of see if we put it all together. Our stocks page is pre-rendered. We click on, say, Google, loading stock here. It went out, hit the API, hit the API, got the information and loaded. And let's do that again, just so you can see in the inspect element. It's grabbing the page and it's making the call to stocks, and it's receiving the stocks from the API, filtering them out, and doing what it needs to do. So we're mixing and matching here. Your server-side rendered pages, which are traditional single page application. So let's now take it a little bit further. Let's say this is obviously sensitive information for our client. We don't want to just let anybody see this information. We want to put this behind a login. So we're going to implement something called the Pixie Flow. And the Pixie Flow is kind of this new bleeding edge way of doing OAuth, or authentication, which is really cool. We actually used it on a previous project, but it is very complicated. And just to go back one moment to the slides, this is an example of what the Pixie Flow essentially looks like. It can be very complex for both front end and for back end. User clicks, It has to be a code verifier and a code challenge that happens in our application. We then hit a backend service to authenticate. We're redirected to a login, an authorization prompt page, which we're going to do all of this in code. Once we hit that authentication page then reaches out again to our backend service. It requests authorization token, receives, it does, obviously the backend service does what it needs to do to verify everything, and then passes back an ID token and the access token, and then any subsequent requests, we're going to be using that access token. All that to say that Pixie Flow can be pretty complex to implement. Specifically, on the back end, there's a lot to do. But using the mock APIs, we can mock out an API and not have to depend on, waiting for the back end to provide those services to us. So let's see that in action. Paste. And this, again, in a copy and paste, get into what everything is briefly after I copy and paste it. Also going to copy over this, and this. Okay, Control-C. Okay, what's going on? Couple of things. Here. And so, yeah, we'll talk about this in a moment. What's happening? So I simply copy and pasted a very simple form into the index.js page, which is our home page or our landing page. Very, very, very simple form happening here, nothing special. Just a text field taken in the username, another text field taken in the password, a button to submit. We're handling the login here, and as super secure as we are, checking username, password, and then we're going to then redirect to our API login. And this is actually in the Pixie Flow. And again, Pixie Flow can be pretty complex. Probably another talk for another day because it's actually really cool. But it has its inherent complexities. So we're going to, in our index.js, we're going to sign in, be redirected, right, to our login API. On our login API side, in our API login folder, file, we're going to take that request, again, for dramatic effect, wait 2 seconds. We're going to then redirect. We pass in the query, we pass a redirect URI that we want to go to. And then we're passing state, which is, again, something for Pixie. And then do a simple redirect to that URL, which in our case is this handle auth redirect. We hit, and this is an actual page. So this actually is pages folder, so it works correctly. This is an actual page that we're going to be redirected to. That handle auth redirect page is going to, once it loads, make a call now back to our endpoint service for the request token. Once it receives that request token, and we can actually console log in here so we can see it, we'll be able to see that request token and then be redirected, again, using Next.js's router, built-in router, we're just going to redirect to the stocks page, right? So let's see all of that working. Here, see, simple login form, admin password. So again, gonna log in, be redirected to the login pay API is going to redirect us back to the handle auth redirect page. We're going to make another call to the service, and then we're going to be able to be redirected to the stocks page. So we can see that console log. Submit. We're redirected. If you look at the URL, we're redirected to handle auth redirect. Points. And error. And that's good because if we have a look at our get token, we have, actually, that's my mistake. I actually set the error myself. My mistake. From the top. Apologies. Something's happening. So I'm gonna have to debug with everybody on the line. Technically, it is working, but my get token, this should be true. And it is. So I should see the token. Let's look at the network and see our get token is returning true. So this is what we should be seeing. So something might be happening here. Oh, I'm verifying if the state is valid. So should be an application. Right now I'm looking at the application and it sets some local storage for the Pixie Flow. So just for time's sake, we can actually bypass this. And start again. I want you to see the actual login work. So we should hit the auth again. If you take a look at the URL, auth redirects. All right, so there's something happening here, which is my mistake. But what should be happening is on success, we should then console log out the access token. and this is actually kind of a good point to make, is that we can test this flow. So while this is an ideal situation, is I can actually switch it into a good point, is that this is something we can test, right? The backend is working on the APIs. We want to test a scenario where, what if, an incorrect authentication, or if the backend returns, something wrong with the authentication, how do we show an error? What do we want to do? You know what I mean? So in this case, I already had it set up where I would make a call, and if I received any kind of error, if my success was false from the backend, because the backend, for whatever reason, returned false, I would set my login error, or if there was just an error in general from the backend API, I would set my login error. And then again, very simple, back to basic, the very basic React component as a page. I'm just has login error use state, excuse me. display, and this is a material UI, display an error dialog, and then have a retry button, handle retry, try it again, go back to the home page. If it's a successful login, you would see, maybe this is the problem. A successful login, you should see the a console log of the token, and you should be pushed to the stocks page. Let's see if that was, I think that might have been the actual problem. Word. You should, if that was the problem, go to the stocks page. Yep, that was the problem. I just didn't spell it correctly. Apologies. So really quick, let's run through that again. Right, click login. I handled some Pixie code verification code challenge on my end, which that code already existed. Went out to my service to authenticate. The server authenticates, redirects me to a login page that I have set up, which is that handle auth redirect. That handle auth redirect then makes another API, another service call to our backend API, gets some authorization codes, makes a call, makes a call, passes it, the codes to the service. Backend service does what it needs to do to verify, passes me my ID token, and then from there I can start doing whatever I want to do with that access token. We should see here in console log, we have token, right? And this token you can take and put in your local storage or into your Redux store, wherever wherever you need to store it, and now you can have your authentication up and running. All that to say, we just did the Pixie Flow login with mock APIs. We were not hindered in any way by the back end. We were not blocked, I should say, in any way by the back end. Again, once we agree with the back end what the contracts are and what the data looks like going back and forth, we were able to set up an entire login flow within a matter of minutes and test out different things. Like we saw we had an error. The error was mine, but again, the error could be coming from if we want to test the error coming from a backend server. We're able to do that on the UI side, handle all those cases, all those scenarios. What happens if it's an error? What do you want to do? What do you want to show? Anything like that, in parallel with the actual APIs being created on the back end. Take a drink of water really quick. Excuse me. So, in conclusion, that kind of wraps up the application part, the demo. Again, I wanted to hit those 2 points, and we kind of touched on a few of the other points like fast refresh and environment variables. There's tons of other features, again, out of the box with Next.js. Tons of features out of the box. Your development environment is up and running in no time, again, with very little configuration. I think the only configuration I did was to get styled components. If I didn't use styled components, I would have been up and running even faster because there's CSS support right out of the box. Next.js does this really, really, really great. What it does really great is it provides this kind of layer of abstraction and a lot of the common tasks, again, routing, APIs, environment variables, doing these things behind the scenes and kind of laying your foundation for a project. That's going to let us build apps faster, right? We're going to have the confidence in that the application is solid and strong, and it is on a solid foundation. We know we're doing it with efficiency, and we're still. And this kind of last point is my favorite point because it allows us to maintain the quality that I believe Lab49 is known for. So it allows us to maintain the quality of our code and just of our work in general, while giving us that boost of getting us up and running faster, getting our foundation laid faster, and getting us kind of moving along faster, where we can focus on the application side of things, design, our business requirements, without having to put a ton of thought into, let's be very, very, very honest with each other, sometimes very mundane tasks, setting up routing, setting up, separate APIs, maybe setting up a whole Express.js project just to have mock API, stuff like this can be kind of mundane and kind of at times trivial, at times not so trivial, because you can run into a lot of issues with, like, especially in Webpack, especially if you're not familiar with it, or you're not the best at it as I am. All that stuff out of the box is done for you, so you can focus on the task at hand. So we're giving the same quality of work, in my opinion, faster and with the same efficiency that we're known for. That was a lot. So I think at this point that's my conclusion. Again, if you're going to use, if you have a project, just one last point, if you have a project coming up and it is you have an opportunity to do something from the ground up. I worked on a project previously. I was working with Brian McAllister on it, where we were able to use Next.js because we were able to get in on the ground up. So we were writing basically, day one, writing the code from the ground up. We were able to take advantage of this. But again, I think, excuse me, I think it's applicable pretty much anywhere. So I highly recommend it. And with that, I think if we want to do open forum, I know I'm a little over, which is
Carlin, I spoke with Brian. Let's do a few questions, and then we can wrap up. Okay.
Cool. If anybody has.
Hey, Carlin. Hey, Carlin. This is Kritik. Can you hear me?
Hey, Kritik. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. A couple of quick questions. So one, if you have a nested route where you have like multiple path parameters, so like how you have like people / Carlin / addresses / one, then how do you do that? Like you have a folder name with a symbol instead of a file name. You know what I mean? Like what if there are two dynamic things in the path?
Okay, so you're saying if it's like stocks, symbol, and then something after that is so the symbol is dynamic and something after that is dynamic?
Correct.
There's a few different ways you can do that. You can take, I believe, and I'd have to double check on this, but I believe it also adds to the query. You can query the object using the use router. React.query. I believe it adds it to that as well. I would have to double check on that. I can do a little more research on that for you separately because I didn't dive too deep into that. But I believe it does do that. Let me do a little more research. I don't want to give you a wrong answer. So I'll do that and get back to you.
Okay, no problem. And the other question is, I'm assuming that when you do server-side rendering, you can't use some of the features of React, right? So that's why you had like use effects commented out because you can't use it. Like
I comment. You can, to my knowledge, you can. I only had use effect commented out just for my specific example there. I didn't need it. My use effect was, reaching out to the server, and I didn't need to do it at that point. But to my knowledge, yeah, you can use effects. You can use all features of React that I'm aware of. I haven't come across anything that you can't use.
How would that even work if the browser doesn't even have the React components?
Because that's a very good question. Under the hood, I don't know how it would work. But again, I would have to do more research on that. I haven't gone that dove that
Got it.
deeply into that end of the pool.
No problem. Thanks.
But great question. I'm definitely going to dive more deep into that. And I can get back to you. If anybody else has, by all means, shout out.
Yes, I have a question, guys. I do think that this has some similarities with Gatsby. So what is the sell point to use Next.js instead of Gatsby? That's my question.
So I know of Gatsby, and it is very, very similar. I have never worked with it, so I can't speak specifically to it. The very little that I know about it is they basically are both part of the they use the Jamstack architecture. I know that. Yeah, I don't know enough about Gatsby to say, Next.js, this is a specific exciting feature that Next.js has over Gatsby. So I don't think I can. I don't know if I really have an answer to that because I don't know enough about Gatsby. I can tell you Next.js is great, and I know that they are very similar. As to the differences, I can't really speak to. That I know of, they are extremely similar though. I think Gatsby is also React based.
Okay.
And it's server-side rendering and static site generation. It might be one of those things where, what do you want to use, React or Angular, or less or Sass. There are certain benefits, but at the end of the day, they are very similar, and it can come down to a personal preference. I'd be interested to see if there's something in Gatsby that is, a big feature that Next.js can't do that would make me want to, go to that side, so to speak. But I think it's for me, it might be more of a personal preference. But again, not knowing the details as to how different they are. Maybe one or two more. Oh, someone.
Does anyone have any further questions right now?
If not, if anybody wants to ping me, whatever questions that may pop in your head, down the line. Again, I will answer them to the best of my ability. If not, I will definitely do a deep dive and get the answer for you. But you can ping me separately.
That's great. Yep. And I just want to let everyone know that Brian's going to be publishing the code and the notes, and the recording will be posted soon as well. Okay. Thank you, Carlin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Happy lunch to everybody.
Thank you.
Right. Also have a good night. Thanks, guys.
It smells good, the kitchen, so I had to go.
All right.